Admiral Zexathara stood on the bridge of the massive Imperial dreadnought Crimson Dominion, watching through the viewport as a small fleet of human vessels approached their position near the asteroid belt of Kepler 442. The alien commander's four eyes gleamed with amusement as he observed the crude, angular ships that Earth had sent to this supposed diplomatic meeting. "Look at those primitive vessels," Zexathara chittered to his second-in-command, Captain Vorth. "They look like they were built in a scrapyard by children playing with metal scraps." The human fleet consisted of 12 ships, but they were nothing like the sleek, organic curves of Imperial vessels. Where Galactic Empire ships flowed like liquid metal with smooth surfaces that bent light around them, the human ships were blocky, industrial, and covered in what appeared to be random protrusions and antenna arrays. The largest human vessel was barely half the size of a standard Imperial cruiser. "Sir, incoming transmission from the human flagship," reported Communications Officer Telmira from her station. "They're requesting permission to board for the scheduled negotiations." Zexthara's mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among his species. "Permission granted. But maintain full shields and have our weapons ready. I want to see what these upstart humans think they can accomplish with their toy boats." 3 months earlier, humanity had made contact with the Galactic Empire, a coalition of 47 species that had dominated this spiral arm of the galaxy for over 3,000 years. The Empire's initial assessment of Earth was dismissive at best. Humans had barely achieved faster-than-light travel, their ships were primitive, and their technology was centuries behind Imperial standards. Most Imperial citizens viewed humanity as they might view clever pets that had learned a few tricks. But humanity had something that caught the Empire's attention. Their planet sat at a crucial hyperspace junction, making it an ideal location for a military outpost. The Empire had offered humanity a choice: join as a client species with limited autonomy or face annexation by force. The humans had requested this meeting to discuss terms. Captain Sarah Chen of the UES Defiance studied the massive Imperial dreadnought through her ship's sensors as her shuttle approached its docking bay. The alien vessel was nearly 3 kilometers long, its surface shimmering with energy fields that her ship's computers couldn't fully analyze. It mounted weapons that could probably vaporize her entire fleet with a few shots. "Intimidating, isn't it?" asked Commander James Park, her diplomatic attaché, as he checked his translation device one final time. "That's the point," Chen replied, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. "They want us to feel small and helpless. Classic power projection." "Are we small and helpless?" Park asked with a nervous laugh. Chen smiled grimly. "That depends on your definition of helpless. Our ships might not be pretty, but they work. And sometimes that's enough." The shuttle docked with a soft thud, and Chen led her small diplomatic team through the Imperial ship's corridors. Everything about the vessel spoke of advanced technology and refined aesthetics. The walls seemed to pulse with inner light, and gravity remained perfectly stable despite the ship's massive size. Holographic displays showed incomprehensible data streams, and the air itself felt charged with energy. They were escorted by tall insectoid guards, whose chitin gleamed like polished obsidian. The guards' weapons were built into their armored suits, sleek energy projectors that hummed with barely contained power. Chen noticed that the aliens' movements were fluid and coordinated, suggesting extensive genetic or cybernetic enhancement. The meeting chamber was a vast dome filled with floating platforms where various Imperial species observed the proceedings. Admiral Zexathara waited on the central platform, his imposing figure draped in ceremonial armor that shifted colors like oil on water. Around him, other Imperial commanders watched with expressions that ranged from mild interest to open contempt. "Welcome, humans," Zexathara began, his voice automatically translated by their devices. "I must say your ships are quite unique. I've never seen vessels that so perfectly capture the aesthetic of industrial waste." Polite laughter rippled through the assembled aliens. Chen kept her expression neutral, though she noticed Commander Park's jaw tighten slightly. "Thank you for your hospitality, Admiral," Chen replied. "We appreciate the opportunity to discuss our future relationship with the Empire." "Indeed," Zexathera said, settling back on his platform. "The Empire is always interested in bringing new species into our family, especially when they show such enthusiasm for building things with spare parts." More laughter from the observers. Chen realized this was as much a performance for the Imperial audience as it was a negotiation. The Admiral wanted to demonstrate human inferiority for political purposes. "Your ships are certainly impressive," Chen said, gesturing toward a holographic display showing the Imperial fleet. "Such elegant lines. Tell me, how do they perform in actual combat situations?" A subtle shift went through the chamber. Zexathara's head tilted slightly, his 4 eyes focusing more intently on the human captain. "Our vessels are the finest in the galaxy," he replied carefully. "They incorporate technology your species won't develop for centuries, if ever. Energy shields that can absorb the output of a star, weapons that can crack planets, propulsion systems that make your fastest ships look stationary." "Fascinating," Chen said, pulling out a small data pad. "Because according to our intelligence, the Empire hasn't fought a significant war in over 800 years. Your ships are certainly beautiful, but beauty and combat effectiveness aren't always the same thing." The chamber fell silent. Several of the floating platforms drifted closer, their occupants leaning forward with sudden interest. Zexathara's mandibles stopped their casual clicking. "Are you questioning the Empire's military capabilities, Captain?" Zexathara asked, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. "Not at all," Chen replied smoothly. "I'm simply noting that there's often a difference between theoretical capability and practical experience. Your ships are designed for intimidation and showing the flag. Our ships are designed for fighting wars." "Your ships look like they were designed by blind engineers using defective materials," scoffed Captain Vorth from his position beside the Admiral. Chen smiled. "You're absolutely right. They were designed by engineers who expected them to be shot at, to take damage, and to keep fighting. Every ugly protrusion you see serves a purpose. Those random antenna arrays are redundant sensor systems. Those crude angular surfaces are designed to deflect energy weapons and distribute impact damage. Those industrial waste sections house independent power systems, backup life support, and emergency repair facilities." She activated her data pad, and a holographic projection of the UES Defiance appeared in the center of the chamber. Unlike the sleek Imperial vessels, every detail of the human ship spoke of pragmatic engineering. "This is what a warship looks like when it's designed by people who know they're going to have to fight for their lives," Chen continued. "When you've spent 2 centuries fighting each other with everything from chemical explosives to antimatter weapons, you learn to build ships that can take punishment and dish it out." Admiral Zexathara studied the projection with growing interest. Despite his dismissive words, he was a competent military commander, and he could see the logic in the human design philosophy. The ship was built like a fortress, with multiple redundant systems and armor that was clearly designed to absorb tremendous damage. "Impressive engineering for primitives," he conceded. "But engineering can only compensate for technological inferiority to a limited degree. Our weapons operate on principles your species hasn't discovered. Our shields manipulate forces you can barely detect." "Perhaps," Chen agreed. "But wars aren't won by the most advanced technology. They're won by the side that can adapt fastest, endure the most punishment, and keep fighting when everything goes wrong. The Empire has had 800 years of peace to refine your beautiful ships. Humanity has had 200 years of constant warfare to perfect the art of killing." The chamber was now completely silent. Even the most dismissive of the Imperial observers were paying close attention to the human captain's words. "You speak of warfare as if it's something to be proud of," said Counselor Mexavati. a crystalline being whose voice sounded like wind chimes. The Empire brought peace to 47 worlds. We've eliminated the barbarism of constant conflict. And in doing so, you've forgotten how to fight, Chen replied. Your crews are highly trained for their peacetime duties, but have any of them ever faced an enemy that was trying to kill them? Have your commanders ever had to make life-or-death decisions in the middle of a battle where failure meant the extinction of their species? You're suggesting that your primitive little fleet could somehow threaten the Empire? Zexathara asked, though his tone had shifted from amusement to genuine curiosity. I'm suggesting that you might want to consider that possibility before you dismiss us entirely, Chen said. The Empire is offering us client status or annexation. But there's a third option you haven't considered. Which is? Partnership, Chen said. Between equals. The Empire has advanced technology and vast resources. Humanity has experience in the kind of warfare that your peaceful galaxy has forgotten how to fight. Separately, we're each missing something crucial. Together we could be unstoppable. Admiral Zex Thara was quiet for a long moment, his 4 eyes studying the human captain with new interest. Around the chamber, the Imperial observers whispered among themselves in a dozen different languages. And if the Empire chooses not to accept this partnership? He asked finally. Captain Chen's smile was cold and sharp. Then you'll learn firsthand why our ships are built to fight rather than to look pretty. And I don't think you'll enjoy the lesson. The meeting ended without resolution, but as Chen and her team returned to their shuttle, she noticed that the Imperial guards were studying the human vessel with much more professional interest. Word of the encounter would spread through the Imperial fleet, and suddenly those primitive human ships wouldn't look quite so laughable. Admiral Zexathara watched the human shuttle depart, his mind racing with possibilities. The human captain's confidence wasn't mere bravado. She spoke with the certainty of someone who had faced death in battle and survived. For the first time in centuries, he found himself wondering if the Empire's technological superiority would be enough. Unknown to both fleets, deep space monitoring stations throughout the sector were already detecting movement. Other powers in the galaxy had been watching the human empire negotiations with great interest, and some had decided that this would be the perfect time to test the strength of the supposedly invincible Imperial fleet. The Vrex hegemony had been waiting 800 years for their chance at revenge against the Empire. Their fleet was already moving toward the meeting point, their ships bristling with weapons that had been refined through constant warfare on the galactic rim. They had no intention of allowing the humans and the Empire to reach any kind of agreement. Captain Chen felt the subtle vibration through the deck plates as her shuttle redocked with the Defiance. Her sensor officer was already waiting with a concerned expression. Captain? We're detecting multiple hyperspace signatures approaching from the outer system, Lieutenant Rodriguez reported. Configuration matches Virex hegemony designs. Estimated time to arrival, 6 hours. Chen nodded grimly. She had expected something like this. When predators sensed weakness, they moved to exploit it. The meeting between humanity and the Empire had drawn attention from every power that had a grudge against Imperial dominance. Signal the fleet, she ordered. Battle stations, and send a message to Admiral Zex Thara. Tell him it's time for him to learn what our ugly little ships can really do. Admiral Zex Thara was still contemplating the human captain's words when his bridge erupted in activity. Alarm klaxons began sounding throughout the Crimson Dominion, and his tactical officer's voice cut through the chaos. Admiral, multiple contacts dropping out of hyperspace at the system's edge. Configuration matches Virex hegemony vessels. Count is... By the void, sir, it's an entire battle fleet. 43 ships, including at least 6 heavy dreadnoughts. The Admiral's blood ran cold. The Vrex hegemony had been the Empire's most persistent enemy, driven back to the galactic rim after a brutal war 8 centuries ago. But while the Empire had grown soft in their peace, the Vrex had spent those same centuries fighting for survival against other rim powers. They were everything Captain Chen had described: hardened, experienced, and utterly ruthless. "Signal the fleet to battle stations," Zexathara ordered. "Raise shields and prepare weapons, and get me Captain Chen immediately." On the bridge of the UES Defiance, Captain Chen watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. 43 Vrex ships against 12 human vessels and 8 Imperial ships. On paper, it looked like a massacre waiting to happen. The Vrex ships were larger than the human vessels, more numerous than the Imperial fleet, and commanded by officers who had spent their entire careers fighting actual wars. "Captain, incoming transmission from the Imperial flagship," Communications Officer Walsh reported. "Put it through," Chen ordered. Admiral Zexathara's image appeared on the main screen, his 4 eyes wide with what she suspected was fear, though it was hard to read alien expressions. "Captain Chen," he began without preamble, "we're facing a Vrex battle fleet. Their ships are heavily armed and their commanders are experienced warriors. I may have underestimated the value of your combat experience." Chen allowed herself a small smile. "Admiral, are you requesting assistance?" "Yes," Zexathara replied, swallowing his pride. "Your ships may not look like much, but if you're willing to fight alongside the Empire, I would welcome your support." "Consider it done," Chen said. "But we do this my way. Your ships are powerful, but your crews lack combat experience. My people know how to fight outnumbered and outgunned. Are you willing to take tactical direction from a primitive human captain?" The alien admiral hesitated for only a moment. "Yes. What are your orders?" Chen turned to her tactical officer. "Lieutenant Rodriguez, transmit our battle plan to the Imperial ships and signal the fleet, Operation Hammer and Anvil." Across the human fleet, crews that had trained together for years moved into positions they had practiced countless times. The human ships began accelerating toward the approaching Vrex fleet, but their formation was unlike anything the Imperial observers had ever seen. Instead of the neat, symmetrical battle lines favored by civilized powers, the human vessels moved in a chaotic-looking pattern that somehow maintained perfect coordination. "The humans are advancing," Captain Vorth observed, "but their formation makes no tactical sense. They're scattered across too wide a front to provide mutual support." Admiral Zexathara studied the display more carefully. "No, wait. Look at their spacing. They're not scattered randomly. Each ship is positioned to cover specific approach vectors. They're not trying to concentrate firepower. They're trying to make it impossible for the Vrex to predict their movements." The Vrex fleet, commanded by War Master Grixivor, watched the human advance with professional interest. The Vrex were reptilian humanoids, their scaled hides scarred from centuries of warfare. Unlike the Empire, they had never forgotten that the galaxy was a dangerous place where only the strong survived. "Interesting," Grixivor hissed to his tactical coordinator. "The humans move like pack hunters, chaotic on the surface, but with underlying coordination. And look at their approach vectors. They're not coming straight at us. They're angling to force us into a kill zone." "Should we adjust our formation?" asked his second-in-command. "No. Let them come. Their ships are small and their numbers are few. We'll demonstrate why the hegemony has survived while the Empire grew weak." The first exchange of fire came when the fleets were still millions of kilometers apart. The Vrex opened up with long-range plasma cannons, sending streams of superheated matter racing toward the human ships. The Imperial commanders watched in amazement as the human vessels simply disappeared. "Where did they go?" Vorth demanded. "Stealth systems," Rodriguez reported from the Defiance. "Not true invisibility, but sensor dampening and heat dispersion. Our ships are designed to hide in the chaos of a battlefield." When the human ships reappeared, they were much closer than expected and moving in attack formation. The lead ship, a destroyer called the UES Retribution, opened fire with weapons that made the Imperial observers gasp. Instead of the elegant energy beams they were accustomed to, the human vessel unleashed a storm of projectiles that moved at significant fractions of light speed. Kinetic weapons, Admiral Zexathera breathed. Primitive but effective. At those velocities, even our shields will have trouble stopping them. The Retribution. First salvo struck a Vrex cruiser amidships, and the alien vessel staggered under the impact. Vrex ships were built tough, but they weren't designed to absorb the kind of punishment that human kinetic weapons could deliver. Tungsten rods moving at 20% of light speed carried enough energy to crack a planet's crust. But the Vrex weren't helpless victims. Their return fire was devastating. Plasma cannons designed to melt through armor and exotic particle beams that could disrupt matter at the molecular level. The UES Sacramento took a direct hit and simply vanished in a cloud of expanding debris. "First blood to the Vrex," Captain Chen observed calmly. "All ships execute Ghost Protocol. Show them why our ships are built to be ugly." The remaining human vessels suddenly scattered in all directions, their movements becoming even more erratic and unpredictable. But their weapons never stopped firing. Missiles launched from hidden bays, their warheads designed to overwhelm point defense systems through sheer numbers rather than sophisticated guidance. Railgun rounds punched through space at velocities that made interception nearly impossible. And then something happened that made every Imperial observer question everything they thought they knew about warfare. The UES. Retribution took a direct hit from a Vrex plasma cannon that should have destroyed it instantly. The human destroyer's armor glowed white-hot, its hull buckled and twisted, and atmosphere vented from a dozen breaches. But it kept fighting. "How are they still operational?" Captain Vorth demanded. "That hit should have vaporized them." "Redundant systems," Chen explained over the communication link. "Every critical system has backups. Every compartment can be sealed off. Our ships are designed to fight even when they're falling apart." The Retribution limped away from the main battle, but its weapons were still firing. Even damaged, it continued to pour kinetic rounds into the Vrex formation, its targeting computers compensating for the ship's erratic movement. But the human ships were taking heavy casualties. 2 more destroyers were lost in quick succession, their hulls cracked open by Vrex energy weapons. The human fleet was down to 9 ships, facing an enemy that still had 38 operational vessels. "Captain," Admiral Zexathera said over the communication link, "your ships are fighting magnificently, but you're outnumbered 4-1. Perhaps we should consider withdrawal." "Not yet," Chen replied, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "We haven't shown them our real surprise yet. All Imperial ships prepare for Phase 2. On the tactical display, the human ships suddenly changed their behavior. Instead of the chaotic pack hunter tactics they had been using, they began moving in perfect coordination toward specific points in the Vrex formation. Each human vessel was heading for a different Vrex ship, but their approach vectors were precisely calculated. "What are they doing?" Grixivor demanded from his flagship. "They're moving into suicide attack runs. Are the humans planning to ram us?" The answer came when the human ships reached optimal range. Each vessel unleashed every weapon it had in a concentrated barrage aimed at a single target. The UES Defiance fired 18 missiles, 4 railgun rounds, and a focused particle beam all at the same Vrex dreadnought. The alien ship's shields flared and collapsed under the concentrated assault, and then its armor began to buckle. But the real surprise was what happened next. As each human ship finished its attack run, it transmitted detailed targeting data to the Imperial vessels. Suddenly, Admiral Zexathara found his weapons systems locked onto Vrex ships, whose shields had been weakened or destroyed by human attacks. "Fire!" Zexathara ordered, and the Imperial dreadnought's main guns spoke with a voice that could shatter worlds. The Imperial weapons were individually more powerful than anything the humans carried, but they had been designed for dueling with other advanced civilizations. Against ships whose defenses had been systematically degraded by human attacks, they were devastatingly effective. Vrex vessels that had survived human kinetic bombardments were vaporized by Imperial energy weapons. In the space of 10 minutes, the Vrex lost 6 ships to the combined human-Imperial assault, but they weren't giving up easily. War Master Grixvor regrouped his remaining forces and launched a concentrated attack on the Imperial flagship, recognizing it as the most dangerous target. The Crimson Dominion found itself facing the combined firepower of a dozen Vrex ships. Its advanced shields held for several minutes, but even Imperial technology had limits. Warning lights began flashing on the bridge as power levels dropped and shield generators overloaded. "Admiral, shields at 30% and falling," reported the tactical officer. "We can't sustain this level of damage much longer." That was when Captain Chen made a decision that would be remembered for centuries. The UES Defiance, already damaged from previous engagements, turned toward the Vrex formation and began accelerating directly at them. "Captain, what are you doing?" Admiral Zexathara demanded. "Something my ugly little ship was designed for," Chen replied. "All hands, brace for impact. We're going to show these lizards what a human destroyer can do when it stops worrying about looking pretty." The Defiance smashed through the Vrex formation like a battering ram. Its reinforced hull, designed to survive the kind of close-range slugging matches that human fleets had perfected, absorbed incredible punishment as Vrex weapons tried to stop its approach. Armor ablated away, internal explosions rocked the ship, and half the crew was probably dead or wounded. But the human destroyer kept moving, its remaining weapons firing at point-blank range into Vrex hulls. When it finally came to rest, wedged in the superstructure of a Vrex dreadnought, both ships were clearly doomed. But Chen's sacrifice had broken the Vrex formation and given the Imperial ships the opening they needed. Admiral Zexathara pressed his advantage, bringing the full power of his fleet to bear on the scattered Vrex vessels. Without their formation integrity, the hegemony ships found themselves fighting as individuals against a coordinated Imperial assault. One by one, they were picked off or forced to retreat. When the battle was over, the human fleet had been reduced to 6 badly damaged vessels. But they had helped the Empire achieve something that 8 centuries of peace had made seem impossible: a decisive victory against a peer opponent. As rescue shuttles moved to evacuate the survivors from the Defiance, Admiral Zexathara realized that his entire understanding of warfare had been transformed in a single engagement. The humans hadn't won through superior technology or overwhelming numbers. They had won through experience, coordination, and a willingness to sacrifice everything for victory. The galaxy would never look the same again. Captain Sarah Chen woke up in an Imperial medical bay 3 days after the battle, her body wrapped in advanced healing matrices that were slowly repairing the damage from her ship's final charge. The first thing she saw was Admiral Zexathara standing beside her bed, his 4 eyes reflecting what she had learned to recognize as respect. "Captain," he said formally, "I owe you and your crews an apology, and more importantly, I owe you a debt that the Empire may never be able to repay." Chen tried to sit up, wincing as the healing systems protested the movement. "How many of my people made it?" 63% of your crews survived," Zexathara reported, "higher than we expected, given the damage your ships sustained. Your engineering systems are remarkably resilient." Chen nodded, though the loss of nearly 400 crew members weighed heavily on her. In the human fleet, every life mattered, because they had so few to spare. "What about the Vrex?" she asked. "Destroyed or scattered," the Admiral replied. "War Master Grixvor was killed when your ship rammed his flagship. The survivors retreated to the Rim, but they won't be back anytime soon. Word of their defeat is already spreading through hegemony space." Chen studied the alien's expression. "And what does that mean for humanity?" Admiral Zexathara was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weight that hadn't been there before their battle. "It means everything has changed, Captain. The Empire has been forced to confront some uncomfortable truths about itself. We've become so focused on maintaining peace that we forgot how to fight for it. Your people reminded us that sometimes survival requires more than advanced technology and pretty ships." Over the following weeks, as the human survivors recovered and temporary repairs were made to their vessels, a remarkable transformation began taking place throughout the Imperial fleet. Officers who had previously dismissed human military doctrine were now studying it intensively. Engineers were analyzing the damage patterns on human ships to understand how they had survived punishment that should have destroyed them. Most importantly, Admiral Zexathara had begun implementing changes based on what he had learned from watching humans fight. Imperial crews started cross-training on multiple systems so that ships could continue operating even with extensive damage. Tactical officers studied human pack hunting techniques and began incorporating them into Imperial doctrine. But the changes weren't limited to military matters. Word of the battle had spread throughout the Empire, and public opinion about humanity had shifted dramatically. The species that had been dismissed as primitive upstarts were now being hailed as the warriors who had saved an Imperial fleet from destruction. Captain Chen found herself summoned to a meeting on the Empire's sector capital, a massive space station called Nexus Prime. As her shuttle approached the station, she was amazed by its size. The structure was larger than most moons, its surfaces covered with cities that housed billions of beings from dozens of species. The meeting took place in the Grand Council Chamber, where representatives from all 47 member species gathered to debate policy. Chen had expected a small diplomatic conference, but instead she found herself addressing the most powerful political body in the galaxy. Chancellor Vexmiran, the Empire's chief executive, was a tall humanoid with crystalline skin that shifted colors based on her emotional state. Currently, it was a deep blue that Chen's briefings had told her indicated serious contemplation. "Captain Chen," the Chancellor began, "your actions in the recent engagement with the Vrex hegemony have prompted considerable discussion within the Empire. Admiral Zexathara's reports describe tactical innovations and combat capabilities that our military experts find enlightening." Chen stood at attention in the center of the chamber, surrounded by floating platforms containing representatives from species she had never seen before. Some looked vaguely humanoid, others were so alien that she couldn't determine which end was their head. "We're honored by the Empire's recognition, Chancellor," Chen replied carefully, "but we were simply doing what needed to be done. The Vrex were a threat to both our peoples." "Indeed," the Chancellor agreed, "but your methods were unlike anything we had seen before. Our analysts estimate that without human intervention, the Imperial fleet would have suffered 70% casualties before achieving victory, if victory had been possible at all." A murmur ran through the assembled representatives. Chen noticed that many of them were studying her with new interest, rather than the dismissive curiosity she had encountered earlier. Councillor Mexvati, the crystalline being she had met before, spoke up from his platform. "The human approach to warfare is undeniably effective, but it comes at a cost. Your ships suffer extensive damage, your casualties are high, and your tactics require a level of sacrifice that many species would find unacceptable." "With respect, Counselor," Chen replied, "that's because most species in the Empire haven't had to fight for their survival. When extinction is the alternative, acceptable losses become relative concepts." Chancellor Vexmiran's skin shifted to a warmer amber hue. "Which brings us to the purpose of this meeting, Captain. The Empire faces a choice. We can continue as we have for 8 centuries, relying on technological superiority and diplomatic solutions to maintain peace. Or we can acknowledge that the galaxy has become a more dangerous place and adapt accordingly." Chen waited, sensing that the real conversation was about to begin. "The Vrex attack was not an isolated incident," the Chancellor continued. Our intelligence services report increased military activity among several Rim powers. The Caraxian Syndicate is building new fleets. The Zephyr Collective has been testing weapons that violate several interstellar treaties. The peace we've enjoyed for 800 years may be coming to an end. Admiral Zexathara stepped forward from his position near the Chancellor's platform. Captain Chen, the Empire would like to propose a formal military alliance with humanity, not as client species, but as equal partners in a mutual defense agreement. Chen felt her heart skip a beat. This was beyond anything Earth's government had dared hope for. What would such an alliance entail? She asked. Joint fleet exercises, Zexathara replied. Technology sharing, combined research and development projects. And most importantly, the integration of human tactical doctrine into Imperial military training. Chancellor Vex Miran nodded. In exchange, humanity would gain access to Imperial technology, trade networks, and scientific databases. Your people would be recognized as full citizens of the Empire with all the rights and protections that entails. It was an extraordinary offer. But Chen had been a military officer long enough to know that nothing came without a price. And in return, she asked, your people would serve as military advisors and combat instructors for Imperial forces, the Chancellor explained. And when conflicts arise that require the kind of warfare expertise that only humans possess, your fleets would serve alongside ours. Chen considered the proposal carefully. Humanity had always known this day would come when they would have to choose between isolation and integration with the galactic community. The terms being offered were far better than anything they could have achieved through conquest. I'll need to consult with Earth's government, Chen said finally. But speaking personally, I believe this alliance would benefit both our peoples. The Chancellor's skin shifted to a pleased golden hue. Take all the time you need, Captain. But I hope you'll convey to your leaders that the Empire has learned to appreciate the value of allies who know how to fight. 3 months later, the first joint human-Imperial fleet exercise took place in the Kepler 442 system where the original battle had occurred. 50 Imperial vessels maneuvered alongside 20 human ships, their crews learning to coordinate tactics that combined Imperial technology with human combat experience. Admiral Zexathara commanded the exercise from his flagship, but he had human tactical advisors on his bridge offering suggestions and observations. Captain Chen, now promoted to Commodore, commanded the human contingent from her new flagship, the UES Retribution II, built with a combination of human engineering and Imperial materials. The exercise scenarios were based on intelligence reports from the Galactic Rim, where the Caraxian Syndicate was indeed building fleets that dwarfed the Vrex hegemony. The enemy formations were larger, better armed, and commanded by species that had been fighting each other for millennia. But the combined human-Imperial fleet was something new in the galaxy. Imperial ships provided devastating long-range firepower and advanced defensive systems. Human ships offered tactical flexibility and the kind of stubborn resilience that could turn defeats into victories. Together, they created a force that was greater than the sum of its parts. During one particularly challenging scenario, the combined fleet faced a simulated enemy force that outnumbered them 3-1. The Imperial commanders initially suggested withdrawing to a more defensible position, but the human advisors recommended something different. Admiral, suggested Commander Park, now serving as senior tactical advisor, what if we don't try to win a conventional engagement? What if we make them fight our kind of war instead? The strategy that emerged was unlike anything in Imperial doctrine. Instead of meeting the enemy fleet in a direct confrontation, the combined force split into multiple smaller groups that harassed the enemy from different directions. Imperial ships would strike hard at long range and then withdraw before the enemy could respond effectively. Human ships would close to knife-fighting range, absorb punishment that would cripple other vessels, and create chaos in the enemy formation. The simulated enemy fleet, programmed with conventional tactics, found itself unable to respond effectively to the unconventional assault. Ships designed for organized battle lines were picked apart by hit-and-run attacks. Commanders trained in civilized warfare couldn't adapt quickly enough to the chaos that human tactics created. When the exercise ended, the combined fleet had achieved a decisive victory with minimal losses. More importantly, the Imperial crews had learned something that 8 centuries of peace had almost made them forget. Sometimes winning required being willing to fight dirty. Commodore Chen stood on the bridge of the Retribution II, watching as Imperial and human ships formed up for the return journey to their home systems. The alliance was still new, still fragile in many ways, but it represented something unprecedented in galactic history. For the first time in centuries, the Empire had acknowledged that it needed allies rather than simply subjects. And humanity had found its place among the stars not through conquest or submission, but through the recognition that survival sometimes required standing together against the darkness. Admiral Zexathara's image appeared on the main screen, his expression thoughtful. "Commodore," he said, "I've been thinking about our conversation before the Vrex battle. You said that wars aren't won by the most advanced technology, but by the side that can adapt fastest and endure the most punishment." "I remember," Chen replied. "I think you were only half right," Zexathara continued. "Wars are won by sides that can do those things together. Neither of our peoples could have achieved what we did today alone. The Empire needed to remember how to fight. Humanity needed to learn that survival sometimes means accepting help." Chen smiled. "Admiral, I think this is the beginning of something that's going to change the galaxy forever." She was right. Within a decade, the human Imperial Alliance would become the dominant military power in their spiral arm. The Rim powers that had planned to exploit Imperial weakness found themselves facing an enemy that combined advanced technology with battle-tested tactics. Wars that might have lasted years were ended in months, but perhaps more importantly, the alliance changed both species in ways that neither had expected. Imperial citizens learned to value resilience and determination alongside technological achievement. Humans gained access to knowledge and perspectives that broadened their understanding of what civilization could accomplish. The galaxy was indeed changed forever, and it all began when a supposedly primitive human destroyer proved that sometimes the ugliest ships fight the prettiest wars.